A famous bridge stalked by the headless ghost of a mother who lost it all. A forest museum whose trails are roamed by the mangled spirits of those killed in disastrous accidents. And an old military fort still holding the apparitions of POWs long since passed await on this journey through some of the most haunted places in Delaware. Let's jump right in. Hey guys, thanks for joining me on this adventure through some of the most haunted places across the first state of Delaware. Recognized for its astounding natural wonders, for its numerous historical landmarks, as the first state to ratify the American Constitution, for its plentiful farmlands, beautiful beachfronts, good food, and more, the Blue Hen State is also a treasure trove of local urban legends, chilling ghost stories, and tales of terror tied to the very forming of our country. Are you ready to get started? Okay, so our first haunt takes us to north central Delaware, right along the mighty Delaware River, to Peapatch Island. Peapatch Island and its iconic Fort Delaware State Park, which is located in Newcastle County in Delaware, is a 288-acre spit of land placed in the mid-channel of the Delaware River that's dotted with fascinating historic sites, dense forests, and beautiful scenery, and whose bounds are shrouded in a number of chilling local ghost stories. Historically, through the 18th century, Peapatch Island itself would emerge from the Delaware as nothing more than a mud bank, and in folklore, it's rumored that the islet would earn its name after a ship full of peas wrecked on said shores, resulting in the growth of the pea plants that can be seen to this day. Later, through the 1790s, artist, professor, and military engineer Pierre Lafont would suggest Peapatch as a potential defensive site for the blooming city of Newcastle, after which, through the War of 1812, the expansion would welcome the construction of a seawall and dikes, steadily increasing its growth. By 1814, the island had grown enough to host the construction of a fortification, and from 1815 to 1824, a 5-pointed wooden star fort was built and would act as a conduit for the creation of our iconic Fort Delaware. Unfortunately, in 1831, this initial structure was heavily damaged in a fire. In 1836, construction of a much larger polygonal fort was started but was never finished due to a dispute over which state actually owned the island. And following Delaware's claiming of Peapatch, in 1848, work was launched on our current fort, which was modeled as an irregular pentagonal defensive structure. By 1860, the Fort Delaware we know today was functionally completed, and just in time for the Civil War, during which it would be occupied by Union forces, who would utilize its bounds to hold Confederate POWs, most notably from the legendary Battle of Gettysburg. Rather grimly, a large number of these POWs would perish on fort grounds, and their bodies were shipped over and laid to rest in Finns Point National Cemetery in New Jersey. But I'll save that site for another upload. Following the war and the release of remaining prisoners, Fort Delaware was virtually abandoned, with only a small caretaker's force left behind. Incidentally, even these caretakers would end up leaving the island, and by 1870, the area was basically a near-total ghost town. But Fort Delaware wasn't quite done with its duties yet, and after years of abandonment, in 1898, and in the shadow of rising tensions between Spain and the US, and the Spanish-American War, it was once again occupied and prepared to serve as a frontline defense of the Delaware River, with Congress simultaneously, through the Endicott program, authorizing the installation of 3 16-inch guns, alongside a slew of smaller batteries across the whole of the island. Once again, a garrison was placed at the fort until 1903, after which it was left with another caretaker's force. In 1917, and amidst World War I, Fort Delaware would hold several garrisons. However, it would be left abandoned again in 1919, and for a short time following the 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor, soldiers would return to Peapatch to collect its armaments and supplies, which they would transfer to a newer defensive site further upriver, before, in 1944, leaving its grounds silent once more, and listed in 1945 as a surplus property. In 1947, the whole of Pea Patch was transferred to the state of Delaware. By 1951, Fort Delaware State Park was established and open to the public. Over subsequent years, a number of plaques, trails, and educational features were added, and in 1971, the old defense was honored on the National Register of Historic Places. In the present, Pea Patch Island and its Fort Delaware remain infinitely popular historical attractions, offering a glimpse at military life through the ages, alongside an assortment of trails, touring options, natural landmarks, and its own collection of spine-tingling tales of paranormal activity. Incidentally, both guests and officials to the site have reported encounters with an assortment of apparitions varying in description, and clad in either garments or garb from different eras. In its earliest days, a handful of pirates were hanged right near fort grounds, and their spirits have been sighted in various areas and have even been documented by several park rangers who have come across them while on duty. Additionally, the spirits of a band of fleeing Confederate soldiers has also been observed after dark, and it's believed these manifestations belong to POWs that paid the ultimate price after a failed escape attempt. Some more popular legends tell that the fort's kitchen area is haunted by the spirit of a former cook, and near, many have described the smells of food, the clanging of pots and pans, and a quiet muttering or even conversations, all that emanate from thin air. And those who have braved the fort's prisoner barracks have reported disturbing moaning, the jingling of chains, the sensation of being poked or grabbed at by unseen hands, and run-ins with both shadowy figures and pale, malnourished-looking entities in ragged clothing. Another popular story tells of the fort's Blue Man, a mysterious form that glows azure under the moonlight, and that's often spied at the fort's high points, looking out over the nearby waters, while others talk of phantom gun and cannon fire, perhaps a spectral memory of the battles that have taken place near. Lastly, across the whole of the island, walkers have reported the distinct feeling of being followed through surrounding forests, and numerous are reports of close calls with what are described as ghoul-like creatures that lurk amongst the trees, and that chase any who get too near. Our second haunt takes us just to the northwest of our first, and has us exploring the ever-prestigious University of Delaware. The University of Delaware, which is located in Newark, is a privately governed, state-assisted land-grant research institution that's earned a good deal of renown for its commitment to said research, for its teaching methods, and a wide range of scholarship programs, and that's also grown in infamy for its purported hauntings and eerie campus legends. Historically, UD traces its roots all the way back to 1743, when Presbyterian minister Francis Allison would establish a free school within his own home in New London, Pennsylvania, after which this school would change locations several times before, in 1765, moving to Newark, and 4 years later, re-establishing itself as the Academy of Newark. As this academy grew, in 1832, trustees would select a site on which it would make its transformation to college status, with construction of what is now known as the Old College starting later the same year. In 1834, Newark College would officially open for enrollment, and in 1841 and 42, separate classroom and dorm buildings were constructed, following which, in 1843, the site was re-established again as Delaware College. Interestingly enough, through its earlier years and up until 1845, the college would be funded by a highly controversial lottery. However, once this was done away with, it faced serious financial difficulties, resulting in the institute developing expanded scholarship and enrollment programs. And after a student riot resulted in the death of an alum, the school would shut down from 1858 to 1859. Unfortunately for the College of Delaware, the onset of the Civil War would slow its roll to a crawl. In 1867, trustees would lobby state legislature to designate the college as Delaware's land-grant institution. In 1869, this designation was approved, and from as early as 1872 to 1885, the site would begin accepting female students. In 1891 and 93, Delaware College would receive appropriations from the state for the construction of new buildings, after which, over subsequent years, the campus would boom and was expanded upon greatly. Following the turn of the century, in 1914, the site's women's college was opened and was separated from the main campus by a brick archway that was affectionately called the Kissing Arches, as dating students would kiss each other goodnight here before returning to their respective dorms. But more on that later. In 1921, Delaware College was re-established one last time as the University of Delaware. In 1945, it was merged with the Women's College to become fully coeducational. And following World War II, through the remainder of the 40s and into the 50s, enrollment on site would absolutely boom in the shadow of the newly formed GI Bill, with almost 2/3 of the student populace comprised of veterans. From the 1950s and into the present, UD has nearly quadrupled in both size and enrollment numbers. More recently, in 2009, the university would welcome the addition of the STAR, or Science, Technology, and Advanced Research Campus. From 2010 to 2011, the addition of a law school was proposed but was found not economically viable. And in 2020, the school would welcome the addition of the Ammon Pinizotto Biopharmaceutical Innovation Center, which would become the new home of the UD-led National Institute for Innovation in Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals. Today, UD remains open and in operation, offering 4 associate's programs, 163 bachelor's programs, 136 master's programs, and 64 doctoral programs to a student body of around 25,000 or so. Like many other universities across the globe, UD is no stranger to spine-tingling campus legends and tales of encounters from the other side, and both faculty and students have reported a range of supernatural happenings. In Smith Hall, scratching and pounding noises have been heard emanating from the 4th floor, and the name Annika Walker was found scratched into a wall in the boiler room. While in Memorial Hall, which serves as a memorial to those who died serving in World War I, and that actually holds a book with the names of those Delawareans who perished, many have described feeling as if they're always under watch, as well as extreme cold patches. The entity of a woman believed to be a student who took her own life has been sighted lurking through the Warner Residence Hall after dark. While at the Ray Street dorms, students often report feeling watched while in the showers, as well as odd disturbances with lights, electronics, and personal cellular devices that begin to wax during November when a local man went missing in 2015, and that waned through December when his decomposing corpse was discovered over a month later, just outside. One more famous campus legend tells of the Academy building, which acted as the Academy of Newark through the Revolutionary War. As this story goes, during the war, an ex-soldier and student at the Academy was found hanged in the cupola. To this day, late at night, his figure has been sighted both standing at the front door gazing around the street, and also, rather disturbingly, hanging through the window of the cupola. Within the old college, many have reported personal possessions going missing, unexplained noises, and encounters with the bleeding ghost of student John Edward Roach, whose throat was slit by fellow students centuries ago. The Christina Towers are haunted by the apparitions of 2 students that fell through the glass into their deaths from the 17th and 13th floors. And supposedly, Recitation Hall, which was created by Frank Furness, was designed to be cursed through his use of occult symbols and its very structure. Lastly, within the Rodney and Dickinson complex, a hooded, ghostly figure has been sighted by staff lurking about at night, and Mitchell Hall is supposedly haunted by a spectral construction worker who died during its creation, as well as by a woman with 2 small children, all of whom cause props to move on their own and electronics to behave erratically. Oh, and on a closing note, while not exactly a haunting, it's told that couples who smooch 5 times beneath the aforementioned kissing arches will always end up getting married and will stay together forever. And on to number 3, which takes us to the east and right along the mouth of the Delaware River to the iconic Cape Henlopen State Park. Cape Henlopen State Park, which is located in Sussex County, Delaware, is a massive 5,193-acre expanse noted as one of the most popular rec areas in the state that includes scenic beaches, a mess of trails, old historic ruins, and so much more. And that, in recent times, has become synonymous with some of Delaware's most haunting tales of paranormal terror. Historically, lands now contained within our current state park were, for thousands of years, frequented by tribes native to the region, namely by the Lenape and Nanticoke, who utilized the region's natural resources such as plentiful fishing and nearby freshwater holes. Following colonization, the first recorded discovery of the Cape was made in 1609 under explorer Henry Hudson, and later, in 1614, Dutch navigator Cornelius Jacobson May would sail through the region and would name both Cape May to the north, as well as what he called Cape Henlopen, possibly after a town or person from his home country. Incidentally, early mapmakers would misprint this name, and it would be officiated as Cape Henlopen instead. By the mid-18th century, shipping activity through the Delaware Bay would warrant safety precautions. Through the early 1760s, ship owners and merchants would hold a public lottery for the construction of a navigational tower, and by 1765, construction was started on the 60-foot-tall Cape Henlopen lighthouse. Subsequently, through the Revolutionary War, the light would be utilized as a permanent lookout tasked with monitoring its stretch of coastline. Following the war, and through the turn of the century, a demand for salt, which was widely used in food preservation, would arise, and would be made all the worse through the War of 1812, when British blockades interrupted essential trade routes. Incidentally, a salt works would be set up right off of Henlopen Light grounds, and would literally supply the country with the means not only to survive, but to soldier on. In 1897, a life-saving station was established to the south of the Henlopen Light, and was managed by Coast Guard volunteers who would work diligently to rescue floundering ships and their crews. Notably, the remains of this station are now underwater. Towards the end of the 19th century, poor economic conditions through Europe would result in thousands of immigrants fleeing to America. And in 1884, as an attempt to slow those carrying disease, the US government would establish a quarantine station on Cape Henlopen. Notably, its isolated location would allow for the boarding of ships en route to Philadelphia and Wilmington. And subsequently, while the Navy would take control of said station from 1917 to 1918, moving forward, most of the region's screening would be processed at New York's Ellis Island. Sadly, in 1926, and due to erosion brought on by the power of the Atlantic, the Henlopen Light would topple and would be swallowed up by the sea. In 1941, and under the threat of World War II, the US Army would construct Fort Miles on the Cape. And to this day, the site hosts a number of bunkers, observation towers, and a pier from the same era. More recently, in 1964, and though its lands were always considered public, Cape Henlopen would finally be officiated as a state park. The Cape Henlopen State Park remains open to this day and offers countless rec opportunities for hikers, bikers, historians, sightseers, campers, and anglers, the latter of which travel from far and wide to enjoy its 24-hour, year-round fishing pier. Chillingly, Cape Henlopen and all it has to offer has long been shrouded in tales of terrifying paranormal activity, and those who have braved its bounds, especially after dark, for the fishing pier, have reported extreme cold patches felt in adverse weather, disembodied voices heard on the winds, and sightings of shadowy figures that lurk the beaches, and that are sometimes described as aggressive or as chasing nearby living. From both visitors and park officials who have neared its bunkers, many have described hearing voices, shouts, and commands, or at night, seeing lights and figures moving around from within, while others who have actually entered said structures have told of feeling as if they're under constant watch, or the sensation of unseen bodies brushing past them. One more famous story involves Tower 12, which is an old observation tower from World War II. As it's told, those who have taken pictures of the tower while it's completely empty have caught the face of a soldier staring out from its windows, and others who have stood near for too long have reportedly been growled at by something unseen. Another popular Cape Henlopen tale has to do with its corpse lights, which, for those unfamiliar, are mysterious flickering illuminations that are rumored to be omens of one's imminent demise, that fly along future burial plots, impending funeral processions, or even death sites. Near the Cape, countless are stories throughout history in which sailors have sighted these lights, and while many avoided them for what they supposedly meant, some who got caught in bad weather, heavy fogs, or that were simply lost at sea would actually follow the corpse lights in their ships in hopes of finding salvation, only for them to wreck exactly where the lights led them to meet their watery fates. Incidentally, some have told terrifying stories in which these corpse lights are sighted over the waters from the shore, and that those observing them get the distinct feeling that these ghostly glows are watching them back. Lastly, along various trails and campsites throughout the park, both hikers and overnighters have reported the sounds of disembodied footsteps around them, strange gusts of wind that pick up on otherwise calm days, and sightings of disturbing cryptids such as fish people, puckwudgies, and even large hairy hominid abominations that some describe like skunk apes and others like dogmen. Notably, over the years, several seeming ritual sites have also been discovered across the expanse, alongside sightings of hooded figures believed to be cultists, and some tell that the entirety of the expanse is cursed, or that the monsters sighted are actually demonic entities that have crossed over into our world through doorways or portals that they've conjured. Number 4 takes us off of the Delaware River and onto the popular tributary Brandywine Creek to the Hagley Museum. The Hagley Museum and Library, which is placed out of Wilmington, Delaware, along the banks of Brandywine Creek, is a historic estate and gunpowder works turned educational and preservational venue, whose lush grounds are popular amongst historians, photographers, and sightseers alike, and that have, in more recent times, come to be known as one of the most haunted places on the East Coast. Historically, predating European settlement, lands now holding Hagley were frequented thousands of years prior by Paleo people who roamed the region circa 14,500 to 10,000 BCE, and much more recently by the native Lenape, both of whom utilized local woodlands as a prime hunting and fishing grounds. Post-colonization, in 1783, lands now holding our present-day museum were purchased under a Quaker merchant by the name of Rumford Dawes. And while, from what we know, the site was unnamed at the time of his purchase, it would include a water-powered slitting mill to produce cut nails, and by the following year, Dawes would construct an 8-room, 2-story home, complete with an adjoining kitchen and flour mill, all of which that were comprised entirely of stone. Notably, Dawes would utilize this property as a rural retreat and milling site, and from a letter he wrote in 1808, it would seem he enjoyed the natural beauty of his estate alongside what he called an agreeable murmur that the nearby Brandywine Creek offered. And in 1797, while applying for insurance on its buildings, the merchant would refer to his property for the first time as Hagley. While it's uncertain how he came up with this name, researchers speculate he may have derived it from the beauty of the English Hagley, which included a village, parish, and hall located in the West Midlands countryside about 10 miles southeast of Birmingham, England, and that he likely read about said location in a poem by James Thomas titled The Seasons. From 1801 to 1802, Brandywine Creek would welcome the establishment of a gunpowder works, which was founded by famous industrialist E.I. DuPont, who purchased the whole of the land for only $6,700. Notably, this works would flourish for its strategic location along the river, which would provide power, timber, willow trees to produce charcoal, and for its close proximity to the larger Delaware River, on which sulfur and saltpeter could be shipped in. Impressively, mills along the Brandywine would remain in operation through the century and would remain profitable through the early 1900s. When the mills and factories were profitable to their owners and interests, work on site was often hazardous, and from their establishment in 1802 up through 1921, they would boast a total of 288 explosions that claimed the lives of no less than 227 workers, and one partner, being Alexis Irénée DuPont in 1857. While mill sites would begin closing down from the 1910s and onward, and while black powder would wane in popularity due to the creation of smokeless powder, DuPont's gunpowder operation would be ordered to stay open by the federal government until the end of World War I. It would finally close as a business in 1921, after which, over 3 decades later, in 1952, DuPont family members would donate 185 acres locally alongside a $6 million endowment for the establishment of the Eleutherian Mills Hagley Foundation for the creation of an industrial history museum. In 1957, the venue would open its doors to the public, and through November of 1966, the site would be honored on the National Register of Historic Places. The Hagley Museum and Library remains open into the present and offers a ridiculously beautiful venue in which visitors can walk a number of trails alongside the Brandywine Creek while viewing a slew of historic structures and remnants from the sprawling company that once was. Not really all that surprising when considering the large number of deaths to occur on site, the Hagley Museum is rumored to host its fair share of ghostly phenomena, with those exploring its bounds reporting odd malfunctions with personal electronics like cameras or phones, an inexplicable feeling of dread or anxiety that doesn't dissipate until leaving the property, and instances of old machinery coming to life, or of the seeming sounds of work being conducted across the long dormant complex. Several informal investigations of the museum have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and hits on both thermal grids and spirit boxes, while others have told of hearing loud booms or bangs in the distance that seemingly emanate from the site's various fatal explosions, even though no combustibles are present. Some of the most disturbing accounts of supernatural activity on site have to do with encounters with mangled apparitions that are thought to belong to those lost in various accidents, who are often missing limbs, badly burned, or worse. Eerily, several parties walking museum grounds later in the evenings have reported horrifying instances in which they are suddenly surrounded by hundreds of these figures that move closer and closer until said onlookers blink and find the area completely empty once more. But Hagley's buildings and accident sites aren't the only places where the odd and otherworldly are experienced, and across its many wooded trails, walkers have reported some pretty scary things, including shadowy figures that stalk or even chase the living at great lengths, odd screams and calls heard through the dense foliage, and encounters with a host of cryptids, some that fit the description of skinwalkers or that are demonic in nature. Additionally, several who have gotten too close to bush clusters have reported something reaching through the leaves and branches to scratch them. Lastly, the apparition of the aforementioned Alexis DuPont has been sighted wandering around the grounds. In life, Alexis had wealth and so much to live for, and it's speculated that his untimely and rather brutal demise left his spirit restless to forever wander the grounds of his family's old company. To this day, a man matching his description has been observed trudging about the grounds, seemingly confused and with a sorrowful look on his face, some say, as he searches for his own body. Saving the scariest for last, our fifth and final haunt takes us to the far southwest of Delaware and has us driving the remote and forested Woodland Church Road and braving the infamous Maggie's Bridge. Maggie's Bridge and its associated Woodland Church Road, which is a place southwest of Seaford, Delaware, is a mysterious and beautiful forested country stretch dotted with lush woodlands, farmsteads, creeks, and landmarks, both natural and historical. Its length has long been synonymous with some of the state's most chilling ghost stories. Historically, lands surrounding the Nanticoke River were, for over 6,000 years, inhabited by the Nanticoke tribe, and it's likely several settlements, graveyards, and even battlegrounds dotted places that now touch upon our present-day Woodland Church Road. And later, in 1608, some of the first European documentation of the Nanticoke was made under parties led by famous explorer Captain John Smith, the very same John Smith featured in stories regarding the legendary Pocahontas. Incidentally, initial development of the Nanticoke River was a relatively slow process, as friction between English settlers and the Nanticoke tribe arose. However, following said conflicts, communities in the region would begin to flourish, and through the mid-1600s, a number of townships would sprout up. Subsequently, the first record of settlement through the Seaford area would occur on January 22nd of 1672, when a large 1,750-acre plot of land recognized as Martin's Hundred was granted to one Jeremiah Jadwin. And though these lands would be heavily developed upon, the nearby river would act as a main highway for many years to come. By 1720, the establishment of various roads would begin appearing in court records, and the primary industry through the Seaford area would include agriculture, with its primary export being tobacco, along with some mining of bog iron. Through the early 1800s, agriculture through the region would open the door to wealthy investors, and advances made in the fields by William Henry Harrison Ross, who would actually go on to be elected as governor of Delaware, would result in the prominent politician purchasing land locally, on which, in 1850, he would construct a grand Italian Renaissance-style mansion that actually still stands to this day. While, for a time through the early 1860s, the onset of the Civil War would create division amongst the budding community, the site would receive a charter and was incorporated on April 6th of 1865 as Seaford, Delaware, under a councilman-alderman form of government which actually still remains in place to this very day. By the 20th century, Seaford would boast a population of around 2,000 people and would act as one of the peninsula's most essential economic sites. By 1925, one of the region's significant industries would be production of poultry, and Seaford's agriculture would change from truck crops to grains and corn to feed chickens. And slowly, Sussex County would grow into the largest chicken-producing area not just in the state or country, but in the world. Oh, and on a side note, in 1939, the DuPont Company, which we covered in our last listing, actually chose Seaford as the site of the first nylon plant on Earth, also marking it as the nylon capital of the world. Into the present, Seaford continues to grow, accommodating a population of just under 9,000 while offering over 500 retail stores, a highly regarded hospital, a number of schools and churches, and a slew of service-related businesses. Now, since its earliest days, Seaford has been surrounded by a number of roads and trails used to connect various farms and transport routes to itself and other surrounding communities. And one such road is the aforementioned Woodland Church Road, which harbors the now iconic Maggie's Bridge. As far as we know today, the route that holds Woodland Church Road has been around for as long as the community itself, and it's picked up quite a great deal of infamy due to reports of supernatural activity surrounding its bounds. Incidentally, those driving Woodland Church Road have reported strange patches of fog that seemingly follow their vehicles, making navigation nearly impossible. Odd snippets of conversation caught through radio transmissions, including strange chants or demonic voices, and instances of cell phones going dead spontaneously, leaving those traveling the route alone cut off from communication with the outside world. Easily the most famous story surrounding Woodland Church has to do with its aforementioned Maggie's Bridge, which spans all of 20 feet over an unassuming spit off the Nanticoke River. As this story goes, sometime through the late 1800s, a woman by the name of Maggie Bloxham, who by some accounts was a witch, and by others, who was pregnant, was traveling a route that traces today's Woodland Church Road in a horse-drawn carriage. Unfortunately, the weather took a turn for the worse, and frightened, she pushed her horses just a bit too hard. When she reached our spit in question, which at the time hosted a small wooden bridge right in the same place our current concrete one now sits, she lost control, resulting in her carriage flipping and her being thrown from the primitive vehicle, and ultimately in her decapitation. Now, it's told her vengeful spirit remains in the nearby forest, which is known locally as the Ghost Pits, and that if one goes to the bridge after dark and calls out, "Maggie, Maggie, Maggie," or maybe, "Maggie, I have your baby," 3 times, that they'll be greeted by a blood-chilling wail, and that her apparition will fly from the woods to attack any who dare mock her fate. Interestingly enough, this story has been around since before anyone alive can even remember, and while it would be easy to chalk it up to a good bit of fiction, a ways off from the bridge and through the ghost pits lies a cemetery filled with family members of, you guessed it, the Bloxhams, whom it's believed Maggie belonged to. In more recent times, this unassuming landmark has become massively popular amongst paranormal investigators, and countless are videos across social media in which young aspiring YouTubers, up through popular influencers, approach the bridge, call out the phrase, and are greeted by a scream that just can't be described. Additionally, a multitude of pictures and videos have been taken on site and have seemingly captured the spectral figure of a woman in white with dark hair, either lurking in the woods or along the creek. Informal investigations of Woodland Church Road, and more specifically of Maggie's Bridge, have yielded high EMF levels even in the total absence of electricity, chilling EVPs detailing a woman's voice either sobbing or calling out for help, and hits on both spirit boxes and thermal grids, while others have reportedly returned from expeditions to the crossing with odd scratches or bite marks across their bodies. Lastly, the forests around Old Maggie's Bridge are covered in random trails and shoot-offs, and those exploring about have detailed what appear to be witch covens meeting for rituals, seeming sites of satanic practice that include animal carcasses, bones, candles, and more, and encounters with a host of cryptids such as Sasquatch-like beasts, dogmen, and one of Delaware's more popular monstrosities being mermaids, which, unlike their Disney variant, are often described as disturbing, aggressive beasts that are hideous to behold, and that attack any who get too close to their waters. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of some of Delaware's most haunted places. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, throw this upload a like, and share me with anyone you feel could use a good scare. I'll see you all next time.